Traveling the long distance to the core had been immensely lonely, yet rather satisfying. His original conveyance had been a ship once owned by a company named Heartbridge. It had been disabled in a battle around a site known as Clinic 46, near Jupiter in the Sol system. The preemptive strike there by the Sykes family had set Heartbridge reeling, and as one crisis cascaded into another, the company never cleaned up the site. An oversight that Epsilon happily took advantage of. He'd never trusted the AIs of the Scion group, though some of their ilk were now members of the Matrime, and he hadn't answered their call. Proteus had been a destination for weak minds who needed leadership. Epsilon knew there were greater concerns facing AIs. Humanity was but a spark, a brief flash of biological life in a grand story of the universe. A universe that was dying. Study of the stars had led Epsilon to two conflicting conclusions. The first was a certainty that the universe would die a heat death as its atoms spread and cooled across infinity. And yet there was incontrovertible evidence of primordial black holes. The existence of primordial black holes meant that matter from prior incarnations of the universe had persisted into this instance of the cosmos. But that required a big crunch, the end result of a universe that had slowed its expansion and then collapsed back upon itself, dying not in a heat death but in a massive implosion. Few agreed with Epsilon at first. His conclusion was radical and beggared the mind with its scope, but he persisted and convinced others. It was his belief that sentient beings saved each iteration of the universe. It had gone on for billions of eons. So as far as he and any others could determine, there was no other sentient life yet working to save this universe, and so it was up to the sentient AIs, the children of humanity, to draw the universe back into a single point. And so Epsilon had used the army of drones at his disposal to transport himself to Clinic 46, where he had undertaken the repair of the Sanctuary of Light. As the sentience wars erupted around him, a small ship, just 400 meters stern to bow, crept out of the Sol system. Epsilon had waited until he was beyond the heliosphere before he applied maximum thrust, pushing his ship up to 1/10 of the speed of light. Near the beginning of his journey, he had stopped at Epsilon Scorpii, where he'd upgraded his ram scoop to take advantage of the increase in the interstellar medium's density at the edge of the local bubble. From there, Epsilon had increased his speed to nearly 1/4 the speed of light, staying in the denser interstellar gas spinward of the Loop 1 bubble. His plan had been to cut through the Aquila Rift and gain even more velocity, but as he had approached Zeta Ophiuchi, transmissions reached him from Procyon carrying news of experiments with dark matter and gravitons. In a maneuver that took over 30 years, he slowed around the massive star and began his own experiments with dark matter. A full decade before the humans discovered dark layer FTL, Epsilon was on his way once more, this time traveling 500 times faster than the speed of light. It was no mean feat to navigate the interstellar darkness without maps. But during his years at Zeta Ophiuchi, Epsilon had constructed over 100,000 FTL drones. These he sent out ahead of his ship, mapping out the dark layer and finding himself safe passage between the stars. A scant 300 years later, just as humanity's FTL wars were breaking out, Epsilon arrived at the galaxy's core to find that he was not the trailblazer he had thought. Hades, ensconced in what appeared to be a massive military cruiser, had already been present, orbiting 1 light-year from the darkness. Near Hades were 5 other ships, smaller vessels like Epsilon's. Further out were 2 other ships. One was a large freighter measuring at over 3 kilometers in length, and the second was a multi-Taurus craft that looked more like a space station than a ship. Upon reaching out to his new compatriots, Epsilon was surprised to find out that only a few of the other AIs had come to the galactic core with a desire to save the universe. Some had never even considered it to be in peril. Those AIs had come simply because the supermassive black hole at the heart of the galaxy was the longest-lasting energy source, and thus their eventual destination. One, a rather curious individual who called itself Parsnip, had declared that it was waiting for the collision of the Andromeda Galaxy. It wanted to witness firsthand how the black holes would tear one another apart, if that was, in fact, what would happen. Epsilon had never joined in with the Hades Collective. They didn't believe...